He's gone. The words tore through the radio like a knife through silence, and for a moment, every man on the mountain stopped breathing. The wind swept across the dark ridgeline, carrying dust and cold air through the narrow valley as Team Echo huddled behind a cluster of jagged rocks nearly 6,000 miles from home. Commander Ryan Walker had been the one constant in every impossible situation they had ever faced. He was the voice that stayed calm when everything else fell apart. He was the man who always found a way back. But tonight, nobody could hear his voice anymore. The operation had started 6 hours earlier under a moonless sky. A routine recovery mission, at least according to the briefing. Get in. Confirm the intelligence. Get out before sunrise. Ryan had led dozens of missions just like it during his 18-year career. His men trusted him the way sailors trusted a lighthouse during a storm. Yet somewhere in the darkness beyond the ridge, something had gone terribly wrong. Static hissed through the communications channel. Then silence. Complete silence. Petty Officer Logan Reed lowered his headset and stared into the darkness. Commander Walker, come in. Nothing. He tried again. Ryan, do you copy? Still nothing. Around him, the rest of the SEALs exchanged uneasy glances. Nobody wanted to say what they were thinking. Nobody wanted to be the first to admit the possibility hanging over them like a storm cloud. Then came the drone footage. Grainy. Distant. Difficult to read. A brief flash. A cloud of dust. And then no sign of Ryan Walker. One of the younger operators slowly removed his helmet and looked away. He's gone, he whispered. Nobody corrected him. Hundreds of yards away, lying prone on a separate overlook, Emily Carter kept her eye pressed against the scope of her rifle. The cold mountain stone beneath her chest felt like ice, but she barely noticed. Her focus remained fixed on the valley below. Emily had spent nearly 10 years attached to special operations teams. She had earned respect the hard way, one mission at a time. Yet even among elite operators, people called her Crazy Emily. Not because she was reckless, not because she chased danger. They called her crazy because she refused to quit long after everyone else had accepted defeat. The radio crackled again. Command is authorizing extraction. Logan's voice sounded hollow. We leave in 10 minutes. Several men lowered their heads. Some stared into the darkness where their commander had disappeared. Others simply sat in silence. Emily never moved. Her eyes remained fixed on the scope. The valley stretched before her for nearly 2 miles. Shadows covered most of the terrain. The drone feed showed nothing useful. The thermal cameras showed nothing useful. The reports all pointed toward the same conclusion. But something felt wrong. She couldn't explain it. She couldn't prove it. It was just a feeling buried deep in her instincts. Finally, Logan's voice reached her position. Emily, pack it up. She said nothing. You hear me? Still nothing. The wind pushed loose strands of blonde hair against her cheek as she continued studying the valley. Emily. Logan sounded tired now. It's over. For several seconds, she remained perfectly still. Then she spoke quietly into the microphone. No, the radio fell silent. No, Logan asked. Emily adjusted the focus ring on her scope by a fraction of an inch. Her blue eyes narrowed. Somewhere beyond the darkness, beyond the dust, beyond every report and every assumption, she believed Ryan Walker was still out there. And unlike everyone else, she wasn't ready to bury him. The extraction helicopters arrived just before dawn, their lights hidden behind the mountain range as Team Echo prepared to leave the valley behind. Nobody spoke much. The energy that usually followed a completed mission was gone. Men who had spent years operating together now moved through their routines in silence. Commander Ryan Walker was more than a leader. He was the center of the team, the one who remembered birthdays, the one who checked on families back home, the one who never asked anyone to do something he would not do himself. Leaving without him felt wrong. Logan Reed stood near the landing zone holding a tablet that displayed the final search report. 6 hours of aerial surveillance. Multiple thermal sweeps. No confirmed visual contact. No movement. No signal beacon. Every line on the screen pointed toward the same conclusion. He hated it. But facts were facts. Nearby, Chief Petty Officer Mark Henderson removed his gloves and stared toward the eastern ridge. Ryan would be furious if he saw us standing around like this, he muttered. A few men managed weak smiles. The comment sounded exactly like something their commander would have said. Then the smiles disappeared as quickly as they came. Emily Carter remained alone on her overlook nearly a mile away. While the others packed equipment, she continued scanning the valley through her scope. The darkness was beginning to fade. Gray morning light slowly revealed details hidden during the night. Rocks, dry creek beds, narrow trails winding through the mountains. Nothing unusual, nothing that should have given her hope. Yet the feeling remained. She replayed the final moments again and again inside her mind. Ryan's last transmission had not sounded like a man giving up. It had sounded like a man buying time. There was a difference. A subtle one, but an important one. Her radio crackled. "Emily, command wants everyone aboard in 5 minutes." Logan sounded exhausted. "Copy," she replied. But she did not move. Several minutes passed. The helicopters waited. The team boarded. Emily stayed exactly where she was. Finally, Logan's voice returned. This time it carried frustration. "What are you doing?" Emily adjusted her binoculars and studied the valley floor. "Looking. For what?" "Something we missed." Logan exhaled heavily. "We missed nothing. We searched all night." Emily said nothing. The silence irritated him even more. "You think you know better than the drones? Better than intelligence?" "No, then what?" Emily lowered the binoculars. "I think Ryan knows better than all of us." The answer caught him off guard. Before he could respond, she continued. "He taught us never to trust the first answer when lives are involved." Logan looked away from the radio and toward the helicopter waiting nearby. Deep down, he remembered Ryan saying exactly that during training. More times than he could count. Still, training was one thing. Reality was another. "Emily." His voice softened. "We have to go." She closed her eyes briefly. The logical part of her understood. Every report said the same thing. Every expert agreed. Every passing minute reduced the chances of finding anything. Yet another part of her refused to accept it. Then something caught her attention. Far below, near a winding trail that disappeared into the mountains, sunlight reflected off a small object for less than a second. Emily froze. She raised the binoculars again. The reflection was gone. Maybe it had been nothing. Maybe it had been a piece of rock. Or maybe it had not. Her heartbeat quickened. "Logan, what now?" "Do not leave yet." A pause followed. "Emily, just give me 5 more minutes." The radio went silent again. Far below, the valley looked unchanged. Empty. Lifeless. Finished. Yet Emily could not shake the feeling that somewhere beyond those ridges, the story was not over. And for the first time since Ryan Walker disappeared, she believed she had found the smallest reason why. Emily remained on the overlook long after the rest of Team Echo had climbed aboard the helicopters. The first rays of sunlight stretched across the mountains, painting the ridgelines in shades of gold and gray. The valley no longer looked threatening. It looked empty. That was what bothered her most. After years in the field, she had learned that empty places were often hiding something. Her binoculars stayed fixed on the narrow trail, where she had seen the brief flash of reflected light. Nearly 10 minutes passed. Nothing moved. No vehicles. No people. No sign that anyone had been there at all. Logan Reed finally appeared beside her position. He had left the helicopter and climbed nearly half a mile across uneven terrain to reach her. His breathing was heavy from the effort. "Tell me you found something," he said. Emily lowered the binoculars. "Not yet." Logan stared at her in disbelief. "You kept an entire extraction team waiting for not yet?" She ignored the frustration in his voice and pointed toward the distant trail. "Right there." Logan followed her finger. "I do not see anything." "Neither do I now." "Emily." He rubbed his forehead. "Everyone is exhausted. Command already accepted the report." She remained silent for several seconds. Then she handed him the binoculars. "Look at the rock formation on the left side of the trail." Logan studied it carefully. At first he saw nothing unusual. Then his expression changed. "What is that?" Emily nodded slowly. Wedged between 2 large rocks sat a small metallic object reflecting sunlight at a precise angle. From a distance, it looked insignificant, almost invisible. "Could be debris," Logan said. "Could be. Could be equipment. Could be." Logan lowered the binoculars. "You have an answer for everything." "No," Emily replied. "I just have questions nobody else is asking." For the first time that morning, Logan did not argue. The object was too perfectly positioned to ignore. It sat nearly 800 yards from the location where Ryan had last been seen. Not close enough to prove anything. Not far enough to dismiss. Within minutes, they transmitted coordinates back to the command center. The response arrived quickly. Analysts reviewed satellite images. Drone operators redirected sensors. Intelligence officers compared terrain maps. An hour later, the conclusion arrived. Inconclusive. The object could not be identified. Command ordered the team to return immediately. Logan looked relieved. Emily did not. During the flight back to base, most of Team Echo sat quietly. Some stared out the windows. Others rested with their eyes closed. The emotional weight of the previous night settled heavily across the cabin. Ryan Walker had led many of these men for years. Some had spent more time with him than with their own families. Accepting his loss felt impossible. Yet reality was slowly forcing its way into every conversation. Emily sat alone near the rear of the aircraft with a tablet balanced on her knee. She replayed drone footage frame by frame. Thousands of images. Thousands of moments. Nothing. Then she noticed something unusual. A shadow near the edge of the screen shifted direction between frames. Not much. Barely noticeable. Most people would never have seen it. Emily rewound the footage and watched again. The shadow appeared, disappeared, then appeared farther away. Her pulse quickened. Logan. He looked up from across the cabin. What now? Emily turned the tablet toward him. Watch this. He leaned closer. At first he saw only grainy terrain. Then the shadow moved. His expression hardened. That could be anything. Maybe a cloud. Maybe bad video quality. Maybe. Logan stared at the screen for another moment. You really are not going to let this go, are you? Emily looked back at the moving shadow frozen on the display. No. Outside the helicopter window, the mountains slowly disappeared beneath the clouds. But deep inside her, the certainty grew stronger. Somewhere beyond those ridges, beyond the reports and assumptions and official conclusions, a piece of Ryan Walker's story was still waiting to be found. The base felt different without Ryan Walker. Even the ordinary sounds seemed quieter. Doors closed more softly. Conversations ended sooner. The men of Team Echo moved through their routines with the discipline expected of elite operators, but the absence of their commander hung over everything. 2 days had passed since the mission. Official reports were being finalized. Equipment had been inventoried. Statements had been collected. The military machine was already moving toward closure. Emily Carter was moving in the opposite direction. She sat alone inside a dim intelligence review room long after midnight. The glow from 3 computer screens illuminated stacks of mission data spread across the desk. Satellite imagery, drone recordings, terrain maps, communication logs. Most people would have stopped hours ago. Emily continued. Her eyes felt tired. Her shoulders ached. Yet she refused to leave. Somewhere inside thousands of pages of information, she believed a detail had been missed. The door opened. Logan Reed stepped inside carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one beside her without speaking. Emily nodded her thanks, but never looked away from the screen. You know this is becoming a problem, Logan finally said. According to who? According to everyone. Emily gave a faint smile. That is usually how it starts. Logan pulled up a chair and sat down. Command reviewed everything again this morning. And same conclusion. Emily was not surprised. She clicked through another sequence of images. Frame after frame of empty mountain terrain passed across the screen. Then she stopped. Reversed. Advanced. Reversed again. Logan watched her closely. What did you find? She enlarged the image. The resolution became grainy, but a faint pattern appeared near the trail she had been studying since the mission. Logan leaned closer. Those are footprints. Emily nodded. 3 separate tracks. Could be anybody. Maybe. Logan sighed. He was beginning to hate that word. Emily measured the spacing between the tracks. One pattern moved steadily. Another remained close beside it. The third showed irregular gaps. She opened a topographical map and overlaid the route. Her expression changed immediately. What? Logan asked. Emily pointed at the screen. Look where they are going. The trail wound through several ridges before disappearing into a remote section of mountains rarely used by local travelers. Logan studied the map for several seconds. Then realization appeared in his eyes. That old communications outpost. Emily nodded again. Years earlier, the location had served as a relay station before being abandoned. Most maps barely acknowledged its existence anymore. You think someone took Ryan there? Logan asked quietly. I think someone went there. That is not the same thing. No, Emily leaned back in her chair. But it is the first direction we have had. The room fell silent. Logan stared at the map. Deep down, he wanted to believe her. Everyone wanted to believe her. The problem was hope. Hope could make good people see things that were not there. Hope could convince them to chase ghosts. Yet every time he expected Emily's theory to collapse, another small piece appeared. Another question surfaced. Another detail refused to fit the official story. A few hours later, they presented their findings to the Intelligence Review Board. The response was immediate. Skeptical faces filled the conference room. Senior officers reviewed the evidence. Analysts questioned assumptions. One by one, they challenged every conclusion Emily offered. When the meeting ended, nothing had changed. No authorization was granted. No new operation was approved. As the officers filed out of the room, one commander paused beside Emily. "You need to let this go," he said gently. "Sometimes there is nothing left to find." Emily looked at the map still displayed on the screen. Her voice remained calm. "With respect, sir, that is exactly what everyone said before we found the trail." The officer offered no response. After he left, Logan remained behind. "They are never going to approve another search based on this." Emily folded the map and gathered her notes. "Then we find something they cannot ignore." Outside, dawn was beginning to brighten the horizon. Most of the base was still asleep. But somewhere beyond those mountains, beyond the reports and meetings and official conclusions, Emily felt the truth waiting for her. And for the first time, she was no longer chasing a feeling. She was following a trail. The breakthrough arrived from a place nobody expected. 3 days after the intelligence meeting, Emily sat inside a records archive reviewing equipment logs connected to the abandoned communications outpost. Most of the files were years old and almost completely forgotten. Dust-covered storage boxes. Half the computer terminals barely functioned. Logan had stopped by twice to convince her to get some sleep. Both attempts had failed. Emily continued digging. Hour after hour, she worked through maintenance reports, supply manifests, and engineering surveys. Nearly all of it seemed useless. Then a single document caught her attention. It was a terrain assessment completed 8 years earlier by a military engineer. The report described a series of underground utility tunnels connected to the old relay station. Emily sat upright. She reread the paragraph twice. Then a third time. The tunnels had originally been built as emergency access routes during severe winter storms. Most were later sealed and removed from active maps. Most. Not all. Within minutes, she called Logan. 20 minutes later, he was standing beside her desk reading the same report. "You are telling me there are tunnels under the outpost?" Emily nodded. "According to this survey." Logan frowned. "Why would anyone care about tunnels nobody has used in years?" Emily pulled up a satellite image and placed it beside the report. "Because the trail ends here." She pointed to the location where the footprints disappeared. "And the nearest shelter is here." Her finger moved to the abandoned relay station. Logan crossed his arms. "You think somebody used the tunnels. I think somebody knew they existed." The possibility changed everything. For the first time, there was a practical explanation for the missing pieces of the puzzle. If someone had moved through the underground network, normal aerial surveillance would have missed it completely. The official search had focused on open terrain. Nobody had been looking beneath it. That afternoon, they presented the new information to intelligence analysts. The reaction was different this time. Not enthusiastic. Not supportive. But different. Several officers requested additional verification. Engineers were consulted. Archived blueprints were reviewed. By evening, the tunnel network was confirmed as authentic. Emily felt a surge of relief. Finally, something concrete. Finally, something nobody could dismiss as instinct or emotion. Yet the response from command still fell short of what she wanted. No rescue operation was authorized. No new deployment was approved. The evidence suggested possibilities, not certainty. As far as leadership was concerned, possibilities were not enough. Later that night, Emily walked alone across the quiet base. The air felt cool against her face. Lights glowed from distant buildings. Most personnel had already gone home. She stopped beside a small memorial garden where operators often came to think. Ryan had visited the place many times over the years. Not because he enjoyed ceremonies. Quite the opposite. He believed people mattered more than symbols. Emily remembered one conversation after a difficult mission years earlier. A younger operator had blamed himself for something beyond his control. Ryan had listened quietly before offering simple advice. Keep looking until the facts tell you to stop. Not fear. Not assumptions. Facts. At the time it had sounded ordinary. Tonight it felt different. Emily looked up toward the stars. The facts were finally moving in her direction. Back inside headquarters, a message arrived from an engineering analyst reviewing the tunnel blueprints. Emily opened the file immediately. Attached was a map showing a secondary exit point nearly 2 miles from the relay station. An exit nobody had mentioned during the earlier briefings. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the coordinates. The location sat directly along an old mountain route leading deeper into remote territory. She felt her heartbeat accelerate. For days she had been chasing fragments. Reflections. Shadows. Footprints. Questions. Now for the first time, the fragments were beginning to connect. Somewhere beyond those mountains, a path was emerging. And Emily Carter was closer than ever to proving that Ryan Walker's story had not ended where everyone believed it had. The next morning began with an argument that lasted less than 3 minutes, but changed everything. Emily stood inside the operations center facing a wall-sized digital map, while a group of senior officers reviewed the latest findings. The newly discovered tunnel exit was displayed in bright red. The route extending from it crossed nearly 12 miles of isolated mountain terrain before disappearing into a region with limited surveillance coverage. The evidence was stronger than anything she had presented before. Yet the answer remained the same. No deployment. No search team. No authorization. The risk was considered too high and the probability of success too low. Emily listened without interrupting. When the meeting ended, she gathered her notes and walked toward the door. One officer stopped her. "You are a sniper, Carter, not an intelligence analyst." She met his gaze calmly. "I know, sir." "Then trust the analysts." Emily nodded politely and left. Outside the building, Logan Reed was waiting. He could read the answer on her face before she spoke. "Denied." Emily adjusted the folder under her arm. "Denied." Logan looked toward the mountains visible in the distance. "I was afraid of that." For several moments, neither said anything. Then Emily handed him the newest map. "Look at the route again." Logan studied the terrain. "I already have." "Look closer." His eyes moved along the mountain corridor. After a few seconds, he noticed it. Small markings positioned near several ridgelines. Observation points. Supply caches. Emergency shelters. Many were old. Some were forgotten. But they formed a rough chain extending across the region. "Ryan helped design these locations years ago," Logan said quietly. Emily nodded. "Exactly." The realization settled heavily between them. If anyone knew how to move through that territory without being detected, it would have been Ryan Walker. For the rest of the day, Emily worked through archived mission files connected to the mountain network. Most operators would have considered the research pointless. She approached it differently. She was not looking for answers. She was looking for habits. Ryan had always believed patterns mattered more than plans. Plans changed. Patterns revealed people. By evening, she found something interesting. During 3 separate operations over a 6-year period, Ryan had selected nearly identical routes when alternative paths were available. The choices appeared random until she overlaid them onto the newer map. Then the pattern became obvious. Every route moved toward elevated terrain, offering wide visibility across surrounding valleys. Ryan preferred observation before action. He always had. Emily marked the locations one by one. A path slowly emerged. Logan stared at the screen. "You think he would head there?" "I think he would if he had a choice." "And if he did not?" Emily paused. "Then somebody who knew him might expect him to." The room grew quiet. They both understood what that meant. The mountain route was no longer just a possibility. It was becoming a prediction. Later that night, a new intelligence update arrived from regional surveillance assets. Most of it contained routine information: vehicle movement, weather reports, communications activity. Buried near the bottom was a brief note mentioning an unidentified heat signature detected near one of the ridgelines connected to Emily's projected route. The observation had lasted only seconds before disappearing. Analysts classified it as inconclusive. Emily read the report 3 times, then a 4th. Her pulse quickened. The location sat less than 2 miles from the secondary tunnel exit. Logan looked over her shoulder. "You think it is connected?" Emily closed the report. "I think it is the first thing we have found that is happening now instead of 3 days ago." Outside, darkness settled across the base once again. Most people were moving on. Reports were being finalized. Cases were being closed. But Emily Carter could feel the distance shrinking. The trail was no longer growing colder. It was growing clearer. And somewhere beyond those mountains, for the first time since the mission began, She believed she was no longer searching for a ghost. She was getting closer to a living man. The authorization finally came 12 hours later, and it arrived in a form nobody expected. It was not a rescue mission. It was not an official search operation. Command approved a limited reconnaissance flight to investigate the unusual heat signature and verify whether any activity existed along the mountain corridor. The approval came with strict restrictions. Minimal personnel, minimal exposure, no assumptions, no conclusions. Emily Carter accepted immediately. Before sunrise, she sat inside the aircraft reviewing maps, while Logan Reed studied the latest surveillance reports. The flight path would take them across the same region where the tunnel exit, the footprints, and the unexplained heat signature all seemed to converge. For the first time since Ryan Walker disappeared, they were heading back toward the mystery instead of away from it. The aircraft climbed above the mountains as morning lights spread across the horizon. Snow still covered portions of the higher ridges, while deep shadows lingered in the valleys below. Emily watched the terrain pass beneath them. Every ridge looked familiar now. She had spent days studying satellite images until the landscape felt almost personal. After nearly an hour in the air, the pilot pointed toward a distant ridgeline. "That is the location." Emily leaned forward. The sensors immediately began scanning the area. Thermal cameras swept across rocks, cliffs, and narrow mountain trails. At first, nothing appeared unusual. Then one of the technicians froze. "Hold on." Everyone turned toward his screen. A faint thermal signature flickered near the edge of a canyon. It disappeared, reappeared, then vanished again. Logan stepped closer. "Can you identify it?" The technician shook his head. "Not yet." Emily studied the coordinates. Her heartbeat quickened. The location sat exactly where her projected route suggested it should. Not near a village. Not near any known traffic corridor. Just a remote section of mountains that nobody had paid attention to until now. The aircraft circled again. This time the thermal image lasted longer. Several distinct heat sources appeared clustered together before moving beneath an overhang and disappearing from view. Silence filled the cabin. Even the technician stopped talking. "That is not random," Logan said quietly. Nobody disagreed. Within minutes, the information was transmitted back to command. Analysts began reviewing the data in real time. Questions flooded the communications channel. The tone had changed completely. For days, Emily had been asking people to trust her instincts. Now the evidence was starting to speak for itself. The aircraft continued monitoring the area throughout the afternoon. Additional observations revealed movement patterns along the canyon route. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that could reveal identities. But enough to establish one critical fact. Someone was there. Someone had been there repeatedly. As the aircraft turned back toward base, Logan sat beside Emily and stared out the window. "You know what this means." Emily nodded. "They cannot ignore it anymore." Logan smiled for the first time in days. "No, they cannot." Back at headquarters, senior officers gathered almost immediately. Maps covered conference room walls. Analysts compared new data against everything collected during the previous week. The mountain corridor that had once seemed like a wild theory now sat at the center of every discussion. Late that evening, Emily received a message requesting her presence in the operations center. When she arrived, the room was crowded. Screens displayed live imagery from the region. Officers stood around planning tables. The atmosphere felt completely different from the skepticism she had faced before. One commander looked directly at her. "Carter." "Sir." He tapped a map showing the canyon. "Tomorrow morning, we are sending a team." Emily remained perfectly still. "Understood." The commander studied her for a moment. "You were right about one thing." Emily waited. The story was not over. As she left the room, she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel since the mission began. Hope. Real hope. Because beyond those mountains, beyond the canyon and the hidden routes and the unanswered questions, a team was finally moving toward the truth. And Emily Carter was going with them. The team departed before sunrise. A cold wind swept across the mountain range as two helicopters carried the operators toward the canyon that had dominated every briefing room conversation for the past week. Nobody spoke much during the flight. The reality of what they were attempting weighed heavily on everyone aboard. For days, they had followed fragments of evidence that most people considered meaningless. Now those fragments had led them back into the mountains. Emily Carter sat near the rear of the aircraft with a map resting across her knees. Every coordinate, Every observation, every trail marker. She had memorized them all. Across from her, Logan Reed checked equipment one final time before glancing toward her. You ever think about what happens if we get there and find nothing? Emily looked up from the map. Every day. And then at least we know. Logan nodded. That was the thing about Emily. She never chased hope for its own sake. She chased answers. The helicopters landed several miles from the canyon to avoid drawing attention. From there, the team continued on foot across steep terrain. The climb took hours. Loose rocks shifted beneath their boots. Thin mountain air made every step feel heavier. Yet nobody complained. Every operator understood what was at stake. By late morning, they reached an observation point overlooking the canyon. The location matched the coordinates identified during the surveillance flights. Through binoculars, the area appeared quiet, empty, untouched. For a moment, the familiar doubt returned. Then one of the operators noticed something unusual near the base of a rock formation. Movement, he whispered. Instantly, every pair of binoculars focused on the area. Emily studied the location carefully. A figure emerged briefly from the shadows before disappearing again. Then another appeared farther down the trail. Logan lowered his binoculars. That confirms it. Emily remained focused. Not yet. What do you mean, not yet? She pointed toward a section of terrain beyond the canyon wall. Look there. The others followed her direction. Hidden among the rocks sat a small structure nearly invisible from above. Weathered, camouflaged by the landscape. Easy to miss unless someone knew exactly where to look. The discovery changed everything. Hours passed as the team carefully observed the area. Piece by piece, a clearer picture emerged. The canyon was not abandoned. It was being used. Routes connected multiple observation points. Temporary shelters blended into the terrain. Activity appeared organized rather than random. By mid-afternoon, new instructions arrived from command. Continue observation. Confirm identities if possible. Avoid unnecessary risks. The team acknowledged the orders and settled into position. As the sun began descending toward the western horizon, Emily adjusted her optics and scanned the area one more time. That was when she saw it. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. The figure appeared only for a moment near the edge of the structure. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving slowly. The distance made details impossible to distinguish. Yet something about the posture felt familiar. Her pulse quickened. She focused again. The figure disappeared. Several seconds passed. Then it emerged once more. Logan noticed her reaction immediately. What is it? Emily never looked away. There. Logan raised his binoculars. The figure remained visible for only a few seconds before stepping back into cover. Silence followed. Long, heavy silence. Finally, Logan lowered his optics. His voice barely rose above a whisper. No way. Emily said nothing. She could not. Every instinct inside her told her the same thing. After days of questions, after countless dead ends, after everyone else had moved on, she was looking at the answer she had been searching for. And somewhere beyond the canyon wall, the man they thought they had lost was closer than anyone dared imagine. The confirmation came just after sunset. Additional observation revealed enough detail to remove all doubt. The figure moving near the hidden structure was Ryan Walker. Older, tired, slower than anyone on Team Echo had ever seen him. But alive. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Years of training had taught them to remain calm under pressure, yet this moment felt different. Logan Reed lowered his binoculars and stared at the ground. A week earlier, he had accepted the loss of his commander. He had attended the briefings, signed the reports, helped prepare the official conclusions. Now, every one of those conclusions had collapsed in front of him. Emily Carter remained focused on the distant structure. She did not celebrate. She did not smile. She simply continued watching, the same way she had watched from the mountain overlook on the first morning when everyone else was preparing to leave. The same way she had studied thousands of images when everyone else had stopped looking. The same way she had followed questions when everyone else accepted answers. By nightfall, command authorized immediate recovery operations. The planning moved quickly. Routes were selected. Communications established. Every detail was reviewed with extraordinary care. Hours later, the operation began. The team moved through the mountain corridor that Emily had traced piece by piece across maps and satellite images. Each step carried them closer to the truth they had fought to uncover. Shortly before dawn, the mission ended successfully. Ryan Walker was finally brought home. The moment he stepped onto the helicopter, a silence settled across the aircraft. Not because anyone lacked words, because nobody trusted their voice. Several operators looked away. Others simply stared. Ryan noticed all of it. His face showed exhaustion, but his eyes remained steady. Familiar. Unmistakably his. Logan sat across from him for nearly 10 minutes before speaking. "You know we buried you on paper." Ryan gave a faint smile. Would not be the first time bureaucracy got ahead of itself. A ripple of laughter moved through the cabin. It was the first genuine laughter anyone had heard in days. Back at the base, news spread rapidly. Personnel who had followed the story could hardly believe it. Analysts reviewed timelines. Officers updated reports. Entire meetings were dedicated to understanding how one missing detail had nearly changed everything. Yet among Team Echo, the conversation centered on a different question. Why had Emily refused to quit when everyone else had moved on? A week later, Ryan entered the operations building for the first time since returning. Conversations stopped as he walked through the hallway. Operators stood from their desks. Some smiled. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Ryan acknowledged them all before entering the conference room where Team Echo waited. Emily sat quietly near the back, exactly where she always preferred to be. Ryan looked around the room. "I read the reports." Nobody spoke. His eyes finally settled on Emily. Most of them, anyway. A few people laughed. Ryan took a slow breath. "The official version says I came home because intelligence discovered new information." He paused. "That is not true." The room became completely silent. Ryan continued. "The truth is that everyone was given reasons to stop looking." His gaze never left Emily. Everyone except one person. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Attention had never been something she wanted. Ryan smiled. "The reports call her a sniper." He shook his head. "That is incomplete." Several people exchanged curious glances. Ryan folded his arms. "A sniper sees things other people miss. Emily did that. But what brought me home was not her eyesight." He paused again. It was her refusal to give up when giving up would have been easier. No one spoke. No one needed to. They all remembered the meetings. The doubts. The arguments. The long nights. Ryan nodded toward Emily. "The rest of us were looking for proof." His voice softened. She was looking for the truth. And in that moment, every person in the room understood the lesson they would remember long after the mission faded into history. Respect had never come from rank. It had never come from titles, medals, or reputation. It came from persistence, loyalty, and the courage to keep searching when everyone else stopped. Emily Carter never asked for recognition. She never demanded respect. She earned it.